12 after the hour. That's my friend Rick Steves from Washington Normal. And speaking of Washington Normal, I'll be headed up to Olympia tomorrow night for a fundraising dinner for Washington Normal at Frankie's Club up there in Olympia, Lacey area. And so if you're up in that area and you'd like to contribute to Washington Normal, I believe the fundraising dinner is $30. That gets you the dinner and the membership to Frankie's up there, which is the membership only, pot smoking allowed, private club, perfectly legal up there in Washington. So we'll be heading up there on the Amtrak tomorrow. Hope to see you there. But now it's time for us to go behind the headlines. And I wanted to just focus a little bit on these recent punishments for mixed martial arts fighters and of course, the boxer Julio Cesar Chavez. Alex Caceres, we covered his story just a couple days ago, got suspended 6 months for marijuana metabolites in a post-fight drug test. Nick Diaz, we've covered him a lot. He's the medical marijuana patient in California who's been now caught twice. The second time he was caught, suspended for a year. We got Matt Riddle, who was just dropped from the UFC for his positive test. Thiago Silva, who was suspended for his positive test. And then again, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. from boxing, who the Nevada State Athletic Commission fined him 30% of his $3 million purse, cost him $900,000 for a positive P test. That's just amazing. Now, these are guys that are making a living with their fists, and in mixed martial arts, their feet too, and they're being unfairly punished for their use of marijuana. Now, yesterday, Marijuana Policy Project pointed this out. They put up this huge billboard criticizing the Nevada State Athletic Commission about fining him $900,000 for Chavez Jr.'s positive test for marijuana. Now, today, the UFC got into this controversy. This guy was the executive vice president of media, I think it was media relations. I could be mistaken on that, but one of the executive vice presidents from the Ultimate Fighting Championship criticized the Nevada State Athletic Commission's equal treatment of drug test failures for marijuana and performance-enhancing drugs. And his quote, this is UFC's vice president of regulatory affairs, Mark Ratner, said, quote, "Right now, I just cannot believe that a performance-enhancing drug and marijuana can be treated the same. It just doesn't make sense to the world anymore." End quote. So they're coming to their senses here. Nick Diaz was just in a fight. He just had a 5-round championship fight that he lost to UFC champ Georges St. Pierre, who's a monster. Been champ for like 5 years. He's unbelievable. But put up a good fight. Went 5 rounds with the man. Now, Diaz was suspended in 2012 for 1 year for the Nevada State Athletic Commission because he had a second positive marijuana metabolite test. He's got his medical recommendation in California, and he stops using marijuana long before his fights. But you know, and I know that marijuana metabolites are funny things. They'll stick around sometimes and catch you when you're not expecting it. And this is what's happened to him. Now, the UFC's president has weighed in this. This guy's name is Dana White. Kind of has a haircut like mine. Dana White has also commented on the illogic of equating marijuana to, like, steroids, right? That's what they're finding and punishing these guys the same as if they're caught with steroids or testosterone or EPO, any of those, performance enhancing drugs. He said this is Dana White, quote, "To say that marijuana is a performance enhancing drug, I think it's the exact opposite. What the commission is saying is they think it's a painkiller. Still ridiculous," end quote. So the head of the UFC doesn't see marijuana as performance enhancing or pain killing. Now, he's wrong on that count, by the way. We actually have more scientific evidence of the analgesic properties of cannabis than almost anything else it does, except for antiemetic properties, nausea, right? But given the context of what he's talking about, these guys are testing positive for metabolites. They're not pulling bong rips and going into the cage, right? They're not high at the time. So any pain-killing properties that we even could, admit that marijuana has, it's not happening in the ring. Now, you want to make an argument outside the ring during training, allowing them to recover faster or have more flexibility. Now we got a discussion. But at this point, we don't have that discussion. At this point, it's just discrimination. So here's the other thing that's interesting about this. Dana White, the president here, is quite aware that his fighters are using marijuana. Not just some of them, most of them. Here's another quote I found from him. "Everybody thinks that if you did this random testing, random drug testing, you'd catch so many guys on performance-enhancing drugs. No, you'd catch more of the guys on marijuana. That's where you'd really bust a lot of guys. So we got 475 guys under contract, and 400 of them would be out with marijuana suspensions. That's 84% of the UFC. If you do the math on that, it's like 84% or so of the UFC fighters, he says, are using marijuana. Why are they using marijuana? Well, we know why. Anti-inflammatory, pain-killing, relaxation. Joe Rogan talks about using marijuana before he goes in for training because it helps him focus, helps him calm, helps him get into that, Zen-like state. We can talk a whole lot about that. But the standard argument they have, if the guys get caught, if they fail is, well, yeah, it's a stupid rule, but it's the rule. You knew it was the rule. Right? Here's what Dana White and the UFC said they would have to do if this recent fight, because they asked him, pre-fight, they said, well, he's fighting George St. Pierre for the championship. What if he wins or loses, regardless, and turns up positive for pot again? What would you do? Here's a guy that rises to the top of his sport, fighting the greatest fighter in the UFC. Obviously, it's not hurting his career any. What would Dana White do? Here's what he says. With 2 past strikes on his record, could Diaz's UFC tenure survive another positive marijuana test? UFC President Dana White thinks not, believing that releasing Diaz from his contract would likely be inevitable if he tests positive following the St. Pierre fight. Quote, I would say we would probably have to, end quote. Now, again, the standard argument is, marijuana is illegal under state and federal law, and it's forbidden under the athletic drug testing rules. But everybody involved here seems to admit that marijuana is not endangering the fighter's health, and it's not cheating their opponents. Fighters like Nick Diaz and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., they're at the top of their respective combat sports. It's not as if smoking pot's hurting their fight game. And now that 18 states allow for medical use of cannabis and 2 states have made marijuana legal for adults, period, it makes even less sense to incentivize those athletes to choose alcohol over marijuana by prohibiting the latter but not the former. And ESPN's Mixed Martial Arts blog tends to agree with me. Lesser punishment would be appreciated. That would be fine if they want to reduce the punishment for pot, so it's not the same level as performance-enhancing drugs. But it's time for these athletic anti-doping agencies to stop testing for marijuana altogether. Unless you can show us that it's a performance-enhancing drug. I mean, maybe for Nathan's hot dog eating contest. Oh my goodness, look at the time. It's 20 after. It's 4:20 in the Mountain Time Zone, the land of my birth. And that means, Terry Joyce, we have a very important duty we must take care of. The DEA has instructed us to destroy Schedule 1 drugs in small controlled burns.
Have you never met that funny reefer man? A reefer man.